Bada
Are
bing,
we
bada
all
boom.
going?
There we go.
Everybody's recording.
I'm rolling, baby.
See, Mesa me.
All right, let's run it back. Hello and welcome to Culture Illiterate, a podcast where four friends overthink comic book movies. I'm one of your hosts, Jake, and I floss my teeth regularly. I actually thought of a better fun fact this morning in the shower, but then I thought I didn't need to write it down. Turns out I did. With me are my friends and fellow co-hosts.
I'm Jason, and I floss irregularly.
That's hot.
So are
I'm
you?
Matt, and I don't floss at all.
Damn. Do you have swollen gums?
Yeah.
Damn, and he's okay with it, too.
Darn, what a shame.
Body acceptance king.
I'm Sean. I forget what my fun... I remember my fun fact. I've deep-throated a sheath before as a child.
All right, I actually added something to my rec list since the last time we attempted to record this, because this is, I don't even know what number attempt. Day 3 of trying, but however many attempts.
Give it up for day 3.
Give
Good
it up
one.
for day 15.
On the more serious side of things, I wanted to recommend the album Suicide and Sunshine, as you three well know, from Trophy Eyes, which is a really, really emotionally heavy, but weirdly just not too overwhelming to listen to album. But yeah, definitely be in a good headspace for it. And Asteroid City, which while being hilarious, Wes Anderson's newest movie, is also just very emotionally poignant in a lot of ways. And then on a lighter, more fun side of things, with some Jason Statham action, gonna recommend Operation Fortune Ruse de Guerre. And that's for like a nice like spy type beat. It's a Guy Ritchie movie. And then just today I watched The Meg. So if you're into like B-movie creature feature type action stuff, and if you like Jason Statham, The Meg.
Did you watch the trailer where he was wielding a samurai sword?
I did not.
No, I can't say
Well, he
I recall
does.
that.
Well, I want to talk about some Rex as well, because first of all, some of Jake's Rex I want to double down on and talk about a bit as well. Trophy Eyes they're a band I've followed for quite a while, since their first couple records where they were a bit more of a post-hardcore pop-punk kind of band, into later on them becoming a little poppier, and now this album, Suicide and Sunshine, which I think is a good culmination of all of it, and I think it's their best work, very emotionally impactful. I don't think there's a single bad song, and I think they have some of the best songwriting ever, honestly. So, and then Asteroid City, I've seen every Wes Anderson movie. He's my favorite director. I'm a massive fan of his, and I think this was his funniest movie. So, if that tells you anything, do with that what you will. I highly recommend it. I think it's a very, very good movie. Very, very funny, full of a lot of laughs shared between Sean, Matt, and I as we saw it together.
A lot of giggles.
Yes.
Lots of laughter.
As-
Childlike laughter.
As speaking of laughter, season 16 of Always Sunny, I watched the first couple episodes with Matt the other night, and boy was it funny. And it's quite impressive that 16 seasons deep, they're still pumping out quality content. Just very, very funny things that make me laugh out loud, not just chuckle. Genuinely laugh.
Yeah. It's absolutely amazing how they're still making funny content decades in the running.
And they make it relevant,
Unfortunately,
but in a way with like I think the most impressive thing is like they continue to stay relevant and talk about like current topics without making it like cringe old people talking about younger generations and shit, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Back in my day.
Precise, like Jeff Foxworthy and shit. Fuck that guy.
Yeah, no one really likes him. But I have a reverse recommendation, and that would be Elemental, the newest Pixar movie. I don't exactly hate it, but it's conceptually flawed to the point where the more I think about it, the less I like it, because it tries to oversimplify a very complicated issue, which is discrimination, especially when it comes to being an Asian American, which surprisingly I am. So it's an interesting watch. it's not soulless, I won't say. It does have genuine care put into it, but unfortunately, just the concept of the movie itself just doesn't deliver on what could have been great. Like the discrimination allegory can, I don't know, like I'm tired of people like oversimplifying that to not people, if you know what I mean, because it's specifically a human problem. But then every time they talk about this topic in animated movies, they have to be not humans, they have to be animals, they have to be elements. And especially in like Elements case, it doesn't hold up because the movie is about, oh, fire gets discriminated against. Fire is an actively destructive element that is very dangerous. And so there is justification as to why no one wants to be associated with fire and elemental. It sucks, right? Because they can't help but be what they are. But it's not like the other elements had no reason. Not like real life, where in real life discrimination happens just because you look slightly different and you have a different skin color. That's it. Like there's not a lot of differences. But in elemental there are big differences. So
metaphor doesn't fully land for you?
No, it oversimplifies a very complicated issue. And as much as I appreciate, I forgot who the director's name is, but he did try, and he did base it on his own experiences, and it definitely came from the heart, but the concept failed. Also, the marketing failed because Disney hates Pixar, so there's that as well. So that doesn't help. But yeah, I don't recommend Elemental. If you think it's for you, go for it. It's not awful, but it's just my problems with it go beyond just its script and more about the concept itself. That's really it, and that's why I don't recommend it.
Well said. Anything from you, Shawnee baby?
I have one recommendation, and that is going to be, for anybody who hasn't seen it, Unicorn Warriors Eternal. It's a show on Max. By Gendy
it's
Tartakovsky.
HBO Max.
God, I hate it so much. By Gendy Tartakovsky. It's a really good show that kind of like harkens back to a lot of I found out the right way to describe it after going through this 2 times, and it's very much trying to emulate the art style of Astro Boy and some earlier cartoons with some steampunk aesthetics, and it actually looks really cool and really pretty. So I highly recommend it. All of Gendy Tartakovsky's work is actually pretty good, so I would highly recommend his stuff.
All right. Well, without further ado, say that mostly for ourselves more so than listeners. But we're covering Batman Begins, released June 15th, 2005, written by Christopher Nolan and genre veteran David S. Goyer, directed by Christopher Nolan, and shot by Wally Pfister. Stars Christian Bale as Bruce Wayne/Batman, Katie Holmes as Rachel Dawes, Liam Neeson as Ra's al Ghul, Michael Caine as Alfred, Morgan Freeman as Lucius Fox, Gary Oldman as Detective Jim Gordon, Cillian Murphy as Dr. Jonathan Crane/Scarecrow, Tom Wilkinson as Carmine Falcone, and Ken Watanabe as a fake-out Ra's al Ghul. I know we have all seen this movie before, but was anybody else really looking forward to getting to it? Because personally, I think it's such a change of pace to the 29, 30 movies we've covered before this, depending on if you count the Superman 2 as 2 different movies. And I'm looking forward to its sequels as well, but I'm glad we got here.
I've appreciated finally watching a movie that doesn't suck.
Yeah, and it's so good, and it's Batman, and I love Batman, and like Jake said, we've all seen this. I've seen it plenty of times. It has been a few years, actually, because I feel like its subsequent movies are more prevalent and more often come up in a scenario where I'll rewatch them, but I do quite like this one, and I remember Jake and I as children thinking that Cillian Murphy, Scarecrow in this, looked like our elementary school principal, which Sean was also Sean's principal, but he wasn't our brother, so I don't think we talked about that with him.
But I saw it afterwards when you said that the last time, and it was...
Yeah, last time we tried to record this and it went out the window. I brought it up.
Unfortunately, I didn't go to the same
listen-
elementary school, so I have no idea.
Yeah, Matt does. I wish people listening to this, I guess our mom will kind of get it, maybe. But, like, he really
For
has the
Dad,
same face.
too.
Yeah, Dad, too.
Yeah, we'll have to find like a photo, I think, for Matt so that he understands what we're saying and if Matt thinks we're crazy, but he definitely did.
Yeah, they have a similar face, for sure.
So the movie starts with a young Bruce Wayne in Gotham City, and he's on Wayne Manor running with his friend Rachel when he falls down a well and is attacked by a swarm of bats and develops a fear of them. His father pulls him out and tells him, "Why do we fall? So we can learn to pick ourselves back up." Later, while attending the opera with his parents, Thomas and Martha, Bruce becomes frightened by performers masquerading as bats and asks to leave. In an alley outside the theater, mugger Joe Chill murders Bruce's parents in front of him. Bruce is then comforted by police officer Jim Gordon, who promises they'll catch the guy. The orphaned Bruce goes on to be raised by the family butler, Alfred Pennyworth. So I think the first thing we need to talk about is the depiction of the Wayne murders, because I know we kind of looked ahead in our Batman 89 episode and talked about how excessively this would be shown going forward. But in my opinion, this is the last time it was kind of acceptable, because it was kind of reestablishing Batman to pop culture after Batman Forever and Batman and Robin had changed a lot of the public perception around the character. And it was also different enough where obviously the Wayne murders are shown in 89, but it's shown purely through flashback. Whereas while this movie opens with flashback in a sense and cuts between the opening of young Bruce and then kind of alternates between a college-age Bruce returning to Gotham for Joe Chill's trial and then a slightly older Bruce training, this just kind of does the more traditional chronological story of the Wayne murders first, and seeing that and not being told through like a revelation the way the 89 film did it. So I think it does work here. And I also think the movie structures its opening well enough between those three different eras of Bruce that I don't get bogged down. It takes about like 30-40 minutes till you're actually at Bruce Wayne doing Batman things. But despite that, I never really felt overwhelmed. So I am kind of happy, actually, surprisingly to myself, that the Wayne murders are included here.
Yeah, I pretty much agree. I think, it's an overdone scene, but when you're looking at it in the timeline, this movie was a good few years since the last Batman series, so it's reestablishing it, and it was before we had seen that really 100 different times through, whether it was animation, movies, TV shows, whatever the case may be. It was before we had seen it so many times, so I don't think it was annoying or, felt overdone watching it, all things considered. And I think it was done quickly and paced well enough that it's a fine enough origin.
Well, it makes sense, right? Because this was the movie directly after the George Clooney Batman, and I believe everyone was really sick of the goofy, slapstick humor of the Joe Schumacher Batman series, and so they had to go back to being dark and gritty because they fucked that up with Tim Burton, and so they had to go back to what was working before. And yeah, it worked out.
It was basically a replug and reset kind of thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think this definitely... It doesn't hurt as much with this one to see it again, at least historically, because it speeds through things fairly quickly, or at least paces it well enough that it's not a problem. Plus, I like the little additions that they make to the origin, so that it's just... even if I were to go back on it, it's not like I'm watching the same thing. It's a little bit of they've twisted things to a degree that makes it a little more interesting and makes it, its own, as much as I want to say, it's its own thing, where it's it's the same goddamn story point every single time. But at the very least, they try to make it a little bit different, so it makes it a little bit more entertaining to watch.
Mm-hmm.
On that note, actually, I didn't even, I don't know how I didn't think of this. But I don't know if this is what you were thinking of, but yeah, just the fact that it's Joe Chill doing the murder, as is the classic comic book murderer, versus Jack Napier, who becomes the Joker in 89. That is a huge difference in that story. Plus, with this, we do see, like, it's only like a scene or two, but we get a little bit of seeing young Bruce Wayne as like a happy-go-lucky normal kid, which is kind of nice because you actually get to see that he was like
Normal.
happy and good and normal before he was traumatized, and you don't really actually see that in like any other depictions.
Which is
On
weird,
film, at
right?
least.
Yeah, it's weird that we don't really get to see that more often, mostly because it will make the death of his parents more impactful, because you at least get to see what he lost. But the fact that they don't really focus on what he was like before, and then we just flash forward to him being like a brute, it doesn't really, we're more interested on like Batman himself, Bruce Wayne himself, but don't really, how should I say, like pity him, empathize with him. Like, of course we empathize with him because he lost his parents, but it's not going to be as strong as seeing him happy and seeing what exactly was taken away from him for him to get to this point. So that was I like that. I like that we got to see him interact with his parents and see how happy he was before his parents got murdered.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I agree. Another thing I wanted to say about the intro is that I like, and maybe I'm stupid and misremembering and that this is like a common part of his origin, but I like the fact that they drew attention to him being scared of the performers and wanting to leave, because it adds to the guilt that he felt afterwards. And he even says that he would, like, if I hadn't been scared, we wouldn't have left. It's my fault. Like, I think there's a line where Bruce says something to that effect. And I think that's just an a nice little detail that they drew attention to that adds to the emotional impact of it.
Yeah, I like that little addition on top of what Jake had mentioned prior, which is what I was referring to before. But like, yeah, I like that they do make some small adjustments too here and there that kind of like add to the it gives you more of a reason to empathize with the situation rather than it just being, again, the same thing over and over again.
So 14 years later, and we're using the summary for this purpose is just pure chronological, even though it's kind of intercut non-chronologically in the movie itself, just for the ease of description. But 14 years later, Chill's paroled after testifying against Mafia boss Carmine Falcone. Bruce intends to murder Chill to avenge his parents, but one of Falcone's assassins does so first. Bruce's childhood friend Rachel Dawes berates him for acting outside the justice system, driving Bruce through the dilapidated Narrows to show him the reality of life in Gotham. After confronting Falcone in a bar at the Narrows, who tells him that the real power comes from being feared, Bruce spends the next 7 years traveling the world and training in combat and immersing himself in the criminal underworld. So a few of the characters to hit on here that are the first of which I think is Tom Wilkinson as Carmine Falcone, who I think is excellent in the role, and he's like the third most important villain in the movie. But at the same time, that the scene in the bar in the Narrows, I think is very. I feel scared of him. You feel like Bruce is this angry college age kid, though it's kind of funny that like Christian Bale's like 30 and they just kind of give him some messy bangs to try to make him look young. But I'd rather do that than have a different actor or bad CGI that they do half the time these days. So
agreed. However, can we just talk about how fucking terrible his hair looked?
Yeah, it's not good, but it's fine. He's sad. But my main point is there's a lot of players here that like as well as the actor who plays Joe Chill, and it's like a small but essential role. He's kind of perfect for it. But I really wanted to give some credit to Tom Wilkinson as Falcone, because I think that one scene needs to work for the rest of the movie to make sense, for Bruce's character to make sense, for him to get to the point of like, ooh, I'll be a bat because I'm afraid of those, and power comes from fear. And then that subsequently, you know what? I'll let y'all talk on Falcone before I start my next thing.
I mean, there's not much to talk about other than what you just mentioned. He's good for the role. I feel like he was almost wasted because just how good he was. I wish I saw more of him, but that's really it.
Yeah, I really like seeing just like straight up mob bosses in my Batman stuff. It's just right. Because
it makes sense
that like that's how he should, especially when he's starting out.
Yeah, and it's like his whole route is like being a detective, and like that makes sense because it's like that's such a big part. Like organized crime is such a big part of like cities, and that depiction of what he's kind of of his purpose. You know what I mean? So I love seeing that. I wish we saw more mob boss-esque things and Batman things.
I was gonna say like the same thing Matt said. Yeah, I really like that he was there. If anything, I really like when they really kind of try to include a lot of the more criminal underbelly of Gotham, and not in the way of like these fantastical enemies, but that Batman would, face in certain situations, but like just seeing how Gotham as a place has a lot of, criminal activity just in general as a normal city that any city would have. But seeing Falcone, I really do wish that we got more of him, like Matt said.
I think he's really showcased well as the real main kind of foil to Rachel Dawes, actually, because he is everything that is corrupt about Gotham. And obviously you have Scarecrow and Ra's and they're villains too. But Falcone is like the main cancer cell of what's causing these issues. At least in terms of the person, as this rich old dude who throws money around to get what he wants. And Rachel says, I believe, as long as he keeps the bad people rich and the good people scared, it'll keep being that way. She's the reflection of someone who grew up friend of the Waynes, has a lot of influence in the world, and is genuinely a good person, is doing the right thing, and is such a good influence on Bruce and trying to guide him the right way, both when he comes and revisits and then, as we'll talk about later, post him becoming Batman. But I think Rachel Dawes as a character that I felt like I growing up when I was young and watched this movie, I didn't care for. She just didn't interest me, and I think it's just because I was just too young to see what some of that may just be the dismissiveness of being a young boy and I just want to see Batman hit people or whatever. But how vital she is and how fantastic was Maggie Gyllenhaal. No, sorry, Katie Holmes in this one, Maggie Gyllenhaal in the next one. Katie Holmes plays that role.
I mean, Jake, seriously though, if you take a child and put him in front of Batman Begins, what is he going to be more interested in?
Oh yeah, of course,
a journalist, or the man
she
military armor that looks like
attorney.
A bat?
She works for the DA's office.
That slander,
DA's
Matt.
office. Oh my god. Oh, so cool. I want to buy her action figure now.
But even compared to watching this a couple years ago, this feels like the most I've appreciated Rachel. And when she slaps Bruce in the car before he goes and sees Falcone, I was like, "Fuck yeah, Rachel!" I was just really, I don't know. Sometimes it just really.
It was deserved. It was deserved.
I was gonna say,
I feel like she's good at serving as a
foil.
keeping Bruce grounded in reality in some sense, keeping him out of his own little world in his head.
Yeah. Her role in the movie is very important, but it's definitely not something a child would appreciate.
Next, timeline-wise, we have Bruce meeting Henry Ducard in a Bhutan prison, who recruits him to the League of Shadows, led by Ra's al Ghul. After completing his training, Bruce learns that the League knows about Gotham, and believing the city is beyond saving, intends to just destroy it. Bruce rejects the League and its mandate that killing is necessary, burning down their temple during his escape. Ra's is killed by the falling debris, while Bruce saves the unconscious Ducard. Intent on fighting crime, Bruce returns to Gotham and takes an interest in his family's company, Wayne Enterprises, which is being taken public by the unscrupulous William Earl, played by Rutger Hauer. Company archivist Lucius Fox, Morgan Freeman, a friend of Bruce Wayne's, a friend of Bruce's father's, allows Bruce to access prototype defense technologies, including a protective bodysuit and a heavily armored vehicle named the Tumbler. Bruce poses. I can't talk today.
Are you okay, Jake? Are you okay?
I don't know. I'm not even I had one drink, but I'm not even So Bruce poses publicly as a shallow playboy, even to Rachel, who still resides in Gotham, now working for the district attorney's office, while setting up a base in the caves underneath Wayne Manor, and taking up the vigilante identity of Batman, inspired by his childhood fear, which he has now conquered and intends to use to strike fear into the hearts of criminals. So the role of the League of Shadows in this, there's a number of things that are changed. One being that in the comics they're known as the League of Assassins, though I do think it is a smart decision to make them called the League of Shadows in this. I know the technical definition or original definition of assassin is just outsider, but I think when you're making a movie and you're trying to have this reveal that sort of reveal to people that aren't familiar that they're not well-intentioned, that they're extremists, League of Assassins would have been kind of a giveaway for those people. So League of Shadows, while still sounding a little murky, is a lot less inherently violent sounding. And like, if you joined the League of Assassins and Bruce didn't know they killed people, you'd be like, what the hell, Bruce? How do you not know that? But then also with jumping way ahead, the reveal that Ken Watanabe's Raish is not really Raish and was just a stand-in, and that the supposed Henry Ducard is actually the real Ra's al Ghul, played by Liam Neeson. And I just wanted to say, well, I think Liam Neeson gives like, this isn't shade at him because I think he gives like a really great performance. I just don't know why we cast an Irishman to play a guy whose name is Ra's al Ghul, which is Arabic for the demon's head, if anyone's unaware. It's just, and I know that's like sort of a title, but it's one of those things where I'm like, that is such an aggressively not white name.
Yeah, and he's not like,
it's a little silly.
Canonically, he's not white, right?
No, so that's what I'm saying. Like, I really hope when The Brave and the Bold, the next Batman movie for like James Gunn's stuff or whatever comes out, they already said Damian Wayne's in it, so we're gonna see him being the daughter of Bruce and Talia al Ghul, so somehow they'll be involved. They're brown. The al Ghuls are like Middle Eastern, so I'm really hoping in the future we see that done. But the reason I mainly brought this up is because it's going forward, not just here but throughout and we'll talk about this, I guess, in those other episodes of covering the other parts of the Nolan trilogy. But I don't necessarily think that the decision to make Raish white, and then obviously Talia's white as well, which I guess makes sense once you have her father be, and then Bane, who is Latino in the comics and is played by a white British man in this. With Nolan Batman films dealing with being about terrorism and extremism, both foreign but largely domestic during the Bush and Obama era Americas. I think my read personally is that it's a conscious decision not only to avoid the brown people equal terrorists issue, but to reflect that how American policies, in particular during those presidencies, were more of a security theater point of view. They were more to protect a feeling of safety among the elite and provide a sense of an enemy of other, to distract from the suffering of masses and brewing violence at home. So that violence actually coming from home, coming from white people, coming from, even if they're not technically American, coming from like a Western point of view rather than the other, even though that is what you're led to believe with something like Ken Watanabe being the original, what you think is Ra's al Ghul. So I don't necessarily think it's like just whitewash casting. I think it's more than that, though that doesn't necessarily excuse it. But I think that's a huge, that being the overarching theme of the trilogy, American policies on terrorism and security, ties into this, and that's why I wanted to bring it up.
Yeah, and I will say,
it's just unfortunate timing.
I will say,
Yeah.
to be fair, like, and I'm not saying I agree with it, but if Ra's al Ghul was a white man, like, Liam Neeson looks like the white version, right? You know what I mean? So if they're gonna whitewash him, they knocked it out of the park. But again, I don't condone that. I'm just saying, at least they did it well.
I mean, I think it's complicated because, like, obviously, like, 3 of the 4 of us are white, and none of us are of any kind of Middle Eastern descent. But I think it's like, I personally feel very mixed on it because I would love to see like an accurately depicted Al Ghul family in terms of their racial background. And because of what that actually like means to the character, is very important to the characters in the comics and who they are. But I also respect that this is his own thing, and I don't want to minimize the potential creative decision here in like the repeated whitewashing of the villains, because I do want to give Nolan the benefit of the doubt of it was least intentioned in the sense of trying to avoid it just being, let's make my trilogy about terrorism in America, have a bunch of brown people be the villains, as well as because of the fact that it's saying something about domestic terrorism largely.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily, like, it still feels weird, but I don't think it's something we can avoid mentioning when you're discussing this movie and its sequels.
Yeah, I guess we have no real reason to assume that Christopher Nolan was ill-intentioned in casting Liam Neeson, but
and even if you don't like it, I don't think it ruins the movie by any stretch.
Yeah.
If it's an issue for you, it's a perfectly fair criticism. But for me, at least, it does not ruin the movie. It's just one of those things that again, especially because I see a vision there, whether it's right or wrong.
Yeah.
But I mean, beyond that, how do you guys feel about the use of the League of Shadows in this?
I like
in like
it.
a broader sense.
Like I actually, it's one of the things that I find more memorable about the movie. Obviously, I think that I think there was no getting away with any good name there that they could have really chosen, because like League of Shadows doesn't sound too great. League of Assassins doesn't sound any better.
League of Shadows sounds lame, but League of Assassins is just like telegraphing.
Yeah. There's like nothing you could do about that, and I feel bad for that, but it's just what it is. As for like it's that is one of the things that like that is the first time I remember in a movie where I felt weird about like the villain doesn't seem like like this is the person who should be playing the villain. And because I remember it, how I felt about it. It was just such a weird thing to like notice, especially as like a kid. Because this movie came out when I was like, what, 7?
Yeah, 2005. So you would have been 7.
I was 3.
I was 3.
I was
So like
8.
God damn. But like yeah, to notice that felt weird as like a kid, where it was like this doesn't seem right. But like I think for what they did, like Liam Neeson does his part. I think he's good as Liam Neeson. He does a good job. He has a good screen presence. So like I'm not inherently like I don't condone what they did, but like I will attempt to give, you know, like you said, Nolan the benefit of the doubt, but I know I personally don't like Nolan as a director that much. So
Do you think he's
I
overrated?
have my own grievance. No, it's not that. I at least appreciate that this is going on a tangent that has nothing else to do with that is like has to do more with the director of the movie than itself, but like
Oh, really?
for those who have heard of Satoshi Kon, Christopher Nolan is one of the directors who has done a lot to take a lot of his work and make it into live action movies. Satoshi Kon directed animated movies in Japan. One of those being Paprika, which was a direct inspiration for what was the name of it?
Inception?
What,
Is that-
Inception?
Inception. It was it was a direct it was a direct inspiration for it, and Nolan was at least good about it, and later on said that, like, yes, I got a lot of inspiration for Inception from Satoshi Kon and Paprika. But a lot of people, Satoshi Kon died fairly early in his career, and a lot of people don't tend to give him credit. So, like, it's one of those things where I feel weird about not giving credit where credit is due. Obviously, you know, that's a lot of speculation, too. Partially, but I know at the very least that like Nolan tries to give credit there, so it's one of those things where I feel weird about a director because of what is inspiration and what is, you know, what is going a little too far in terms of plagiarism. It's a weird concept that I don't think is worth talking about with Batman Begins, because it doesn't really touch on Batman Begins at all. It touches more on Christopher Nolan, but like, yeah, I have mixed feelings about him as a director.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's worth you bringing up though, because I know like I've talked to you about that before, and I think even if the potential, like again, the blurred lines between going too far in terms of inspiration and plagiarism goes, it colors how you view a director, and then that's going to impact how you view their work as a whole. I do think Raish is also an interesting villain choice because of the fact that like Nolan goes for the ultra realistic, as everybody knows, angle for the Dark Knight trilogy. There's no superpowers. Everything's, you know, obviously to an extent it's ridiculous. You know, a guy is in a bat suit still, but it's all the tech. The Batmobile tumbler looks like it could conceivably be a military vehicle. The Batsuit is very armored. Everything has that aesthetic. And then Ra's al Ghul is a character that is functionally immortal, that in the comics he has these access to the Lazarus pits that revive him from like pretty much any wounds. But so then they take that character and they kind of do this flip on what does that immortality mean, with Bruce believing him to be dead, and then it turns out it's a fake out. And then there's some more that continues on in the third movie of the trilogy in Dark Knight Rises. But I do think it is a clever use of that character while still keeping it within the film's just kind of realism point of view. But that said, I think that point of view is kind of hit or miss for me. Like I'm personally, I mean, to talk about like I think the Batsuit looks fine in this, but looks much worse in the next two. I actually really like the Tumbler, but then similarly to the Batsuit, I think Gotham looks like pretty good in this because at least has like that cool rail system. And then after in the subsequent movies, not to talk about them too much, but it just looks like fucking Chicago, and that's pretty boring. But yeah, I mean, what about that? Well, how do you guys feel about that? That angle that this movie takes with the realism.
Well, I have a somewhat sentimental feeling towards the Batsuit because I went trick or treating as this Batman when I was a child. So I kind of like the Batsuit in this because it makes me think of simpler times. No, but I think it's an interesting take. I think it's not my preferred take necessarily of Batman. And do I think he knocked it out of the park in some aspects, maybe, but not fully. But I'm not upset that he did it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'd say similar things where it's like I appreciate the take and going for realism. What I'd rather it be is not realistic but maybe more grounded, which is, again, that sounds like I'm playing with pedantics, but like it genuinely is
no,
different.
I see what you mean, for sure.
I want them to take, you can throw realism out the window and still have something that's grounded and like have an emotional heart to it, which I feel like later things might, we might see more of, but like
a bit like the Tim Burton movies were a bit more like, they weren't realistic per se, but they were a bit more grounded in some sense, that they were about Gotham as a city, and they felt down to earth more so than this.
And one of the things that I do have to say that, like, I think Gotham's fine in this. I do think I like Gotham a little bit more in
for sure,
Batman, because it felt like Gotham was like a character in that, and this one feels like Gotham's there and it's a city, but I don't really feel for Gotham as much as I did before.
No,
and it's like, it's fine, it just doesn't live up to what I've seen in the past.
Listen, as like a big fan of Batman, and having watched both the Burton movies and these Christopher Nolan movies so many times, the Burton Gotham just knocks this one out of the park. And it's no disrespect to Nolan, I just think that this one's less focused on Gotham as a city and as its own characterization. Because I think when you watch the Tim Burton movies, like, it doesn't feel like you're watching Batman in any city. It feels like fucking Gotham. Like, it has so much character. It looks a certain way. It feels a certain way. The people act a certain way. You just don't get that as much in this. It just kind of feels like a general city more so, which is fine. It's just, I feel like it wasn't as much of a focus
Here,
Yeah, I could definitely see that, because in the Tim Burton series, Gotham itself was basically a character in the movie. And in this movie, it just felt like, I don't know, it just felt like walking through like a normal American city, like Chicago or something. And although cities do have their own characteristics, they can kind of blend in depending on where you are. Like, it just looks like Batman's walking through Vancouver of all places.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. It's like, and I get that in the real world, like, cities obviously have their own characteristics, but aren't fully, aren't fully unique. There are similarities. But when it comes to, like, a comic book movie, I want it to feel like we're in your own unique world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I want it to feel like it almost in a snow globe, where I'm just watching it happen in this special thing. And it doesn't, it's not that I hate that the movie doesn't feel that way. I just prefer that it does, and I don't get it from this.
It's just like, the thing about realism is that reality sucks. And so sometimes you just want to be transported into at least like some kind of alternative universe. Luckily now there's been more attention to art style than just being realistic. Ooh. Unfortunately, video games are on that turn right now, but we will move past that and talk about Batman. Luckily, comic book movies now, at least not the MCU kind, are even the MCU is starting to at least have a little bit of color, but not that much. But okay, I'm getting sidetracked again. So, Batman is very realistic. It is very boring, and honestly, I think I don't know. Is it like a product of its time? I feel like during like the late 2000s to like 2010s, there were a lot of, I don't know, movies that tried to make realistic superheroes.
Well,
And
that's the thing. When you look, this was the trend setter. This and subsequently the Dark Knight of like
yeah,
this was a hard right course correct, as we already talked about. Of like, oh no, people didn't like Schumacher Batman. Here's Nolan Batman, and I think like retroactively, you look back and you start to get this like. And I say you like I'm talking for myself, and I think for people that have the same thought process of you look back and think kind of bitterly of the way that this came in and it worked, but studios didn't understand why it worked. They didn't understand that it worked because Batman specifically is so malleable as a character and specifically can be angled this way. And
yeah,
that we don't want everything to be this way. And unfortunately, it did become a trend beyond just and it did in as great as it was and as much good as it did, it also did this weird irreparable damage to the perception of how do you make a movie like this for adults and what is Batman like it like course corrected so hard that then for like a whole other group of people Batman was purely this.
yeah. It's kind of like what happened with Guardians of the Galaxy, a movie that was so good and made so much money that Marvel tried to implement what they thought worked with Guardians of the Galaxy with almost the rest of their movie library, and it just the product just suffers at the end because you can't just like read a summary or the spark notes of a book and then immediately get why it's so good. That's what they did with James Gunn's style, and then everyone's thinking like, ha ha ha, these movies are fun, but then Guardians comes around and then shows you how it's really done, like a good balance between drama and humor, but the humor doesn't take away from the drama, and that's the key. And that's I don't know why Marvel doesn't understand that. That's why people like the Marvel movies so much, is because humor has a lot of humor in the Guardian series. It's very very important to the characters because they oh my god, how do I even explain this? I need to stop myself. I'm going into like a rabbit hole discussion, and I don't want this to turn into like another like half an hour of discussing.
This is actually what you're leaning up with humor is actually perfect, Matt, for some stuff I want to talk about coming up. We talked a lot about Gotham, but like let's talk about what's happening in Gotham. So Batman intercepts a drug shipment with and provides Rachel with evidence against Falcone and then enlists police sergeant James Gordon, one of Gotham's few honest police officers, to arrest him. In prison, Falcone meets with Dr. Jonathan Crane, a corrupt psychologist who he has helped smuggle drugs into Gotham. When Falcone threatens Crane's plans with his mysterious benefactor, donning a scarecrow mask, Crane sprays Falcone with the fear-inducing hallucinogen, which drives him insane and has him transferred to Arkham Asylum. While investigating his crimes, Batman is sprayed with hallucinogen and set on fire by Crane, but manages to escape and is saved by Alfred, who gives him an antidote for the hallucinogen developed by Fox. When Rachel accuses Crane of corruption, he reveals that he has introduced his drug into Gotham's water supply. Crane then drugs Rachel with the hallucinogen, but Batman manages to subdue him and sprays Crane with his own chemical to interrogate him, where Crane claims that he works for Ra's al Ghul. So, Matt, you were talking about humor and the humor in Marvel movies, and I think that really brings me to a thought of the humor that actually works well in this movie. Because Batman Begins is never really thought of, I think, as a funny movie, but every time I watch it, I find myself being surprised at how much I chuckle at certain jokes. And I like that because it's different than a lot of that humor that you're talking about, that like Marvel Studios winking humor that is very kind of a little bit self-deprecating and insecure, and then also just very like obvious and in your face in a lot of ways. But I think this movie has a lot of subtle moments of humor with like during the drug bust I just mentioned, that's where the one thug wears "Where are you?" and Batman drops right behind him and whispers "Here," which is like A, just cool and badass, but B, hilarious. And there's like a lot of things throughout the movie, like when Bruce gives his coat to a homeless man and says, and then sees him later as Batman and just goes, nice coat. Like it's just little things like that that feel kind of natural that I think are like kind of often forgotten about in this movie.
It's like subtle humor. It's not like the annoying, overdone humor that certain movies by certain companies do. That's very like old sitcom, like draw attention to every joke, like, well, that just happened kind of humor. That shit's annoying, but like this, the few moments that this makes us laugh, it does it in a subtle and cool way.
Well, it's because there are humorous elements to it, but it doesn't try to bring attention to itself, like in Marvel.
That's
like
what I mean.
In Marvel, yeah, exactly. In Marvel, they pause everything to make a joke, and then just look at the screen, and wait for you to laugh. While in Batman Begins, the situation itself, or is humorous, or they just call back to like a lighthearted joke, and it's like the perfect amount. Like it doesn't take away from how badass Batman is or how awesome the situation is, but it just makes sure that it's not too serious, if you know what I mean. Basically, gets to the point where it's not just like he talks in a dark voice, he beats up the villains, and he's like a vigilante who has like a crusade against crime. It's not exactly like that. Well, it is that, but they don't make Batman a one-note character. They do allow him to have like a sense of humor that's funny, but it helps him be more three-dimensional. It doesn't just make him seem like a brute, right? He does have humor. Even though it's like subtle, it's funny. So it makes him have dimensions and not just a guy in a Batman suit.
A couple other of my favorites are like during a couple chase scenes when you see the tumbler for the first time and they're like calling it, the cops are like radioing to each other about it, and the one says, at least tell me what it looks like, and then it just drops into never mind. And then at another point he's like I think it's towards the end of the movie, correct me if I'm wrong if anyone knows, but he's running through cells in Arkham or in a prison, and he says excuse me to like the prisoners are sitting on their like cot playing cards, and he just dashes through in a bat suit, this being a Batman who's like new to the scene, so these people have no idea who this is, just darts through the room in a bat costume, and he says excuse me as he runs by. And it's one of those things that I also think plays into the character, because this is like kind of a slightly more naive Bruce who I think doesn't fully comprehend just how much work he has ahead of him to truly try to fix Gotham, which means he gets to be a little bit later. But it's just nice because it's like Jason said, it doesn't draw attention to itself. But and also almost because of that, the laughs have like legs to them. I've seen this movie so many times, but I always end up laughing at these little bits because I almost forget they're there because it's not just spotlighted.
Yeah, because when they do the like pause for the studio audience type shit, it's like you remember that, and it loses its impact. But this is subtle, so it's not exactly.
This one feels
refined,
real, I guess.
Well, yeah, it's because real life isn't just full of humor; it's full of other things too. And so, in this movie, it's not just about humor. It's also dramatic. It's also action-packed. It's also very serious.
That's what I mean. Like, I don't like when things are all serious, but I also don't like when things are trying too hard to be funny. This has a good mix where I laugh at a couple things, like the things that you guys have mentioned, but also it's mostly a serious movie, tone-wise.
Yeah, the humorous elements doesn't take away from the seriousness of the situation.
Absolutely.
Because they don't pause everything to tell a joke.
So I also want to talk about supporting cast here, because there's so many important characters in this movie, but just shout out to Lucius Fox, who's the real one and never snitches, and Michael Caine as Alfred, who's personally by a long stretch my favorite live action Alfred, which says a lot because I also don't think we've ever had a bad live action Alfred.
Yeah, no. I tend to agree. I think it's just like when you think of Alfred, Michael Caine's the guy you think of. Like, and I'm not just saying like if you're fan casting, quote unquote, even though I hate that term just because it sounds cringe. But I just mean like in a general sense of like if you're imagining like, okay, picture old white-haired British wise British father figure butler. He's the guy that you fucking picture. It's Michael Caine.
Yeah, and he's great. He's honestly
Come on,
great.
it's the man. No,
It
but
is the
yeah,
man.
he is. He is
He's
very
a beautiful,
good
beautiful man.
as Alfred.
He has the essence
I love him as Alfred.
of like not letting Bruce get away with shit,
Yeah,
but also being so loving.
And he's got that like
just being a father figure for him.
shaky yet firm British voice. You know what I mean?
But like it's honestly the most personal Alfred, at least in like the big screen. Of course, in like the cartoon series, Alfred has a very good relationship with Bruce Wayne, but in like I would say big screen adaptations, I don't think we've seen an Alfred this interactive and this much of a father figure for Bruce. I don't think Tim Burton's Alfred was this personal with Bruce, if I remember correctly. It was a while ago, so I could be wrong.
Wow, we're getting to the point where we can't remember the movies we've seen.
Yeah, I mean, this
throughout
is
the
episode
podcast.
30.
That's
Let's do a
impressive. We're at
rewatch of
30 right
everything.
now, and I can't
From the
even-
top.
Oh
my God.
We'll run it back when
And
we
we're
catch
gonna-
up to real life.
Oh God.
That's
No,
not gonna
never.
that's not
Never.
gonna
We
be
do a
for
take
while.
two of every single
Illiterate
episode.
too.
Never. Electric Boogaloo.
The squeak wool.
Also, Gary
Oh.
Oldman is Gordon, though. Gary Oldman is a great Gordon, and I think this is also far and away, in terms of what we've seen so far, the Gordon-Batman relationship is at its best in this movie. Like, I love the Burton movies, and I even like the Schumacher ones, but Gordon is, like, completely fucking useless in those, and he's also just a punchline in the 60s show as well. So I think this is like the first live action interpretation that actually has Gordon as like an interesting character and also like a functioning detective whose like allyship is actually beneficial to Batman. That Batman actually couldn't do it without this Gordon.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
agree. I will say, like, as much as I adore the Burton movies, and as much as I enjoy the Schumacher movies, it's like the one thing that I don't like about them, or one of the few things, I guess, is like Gordon's just a guy. Like he could be any cop. Like there's nothing about him that makes him Gordon. And this movie, I feel like really gets that right. You know, it feels like Gordon. He has a character. He has a connection with Batman. It shows him kind of when all the other cops are iffy on Batman, he's a lot more open to him, and he has that connection. I think they did a great job with that, and I think Gary Oldman was great casting.
Yeah. Well, they also did a great job just building his character, just making him seem like a very caring person. Because the first time we see him was in the flashback scene, which Bruce is in the police station, waiting to be picked up. And Gordon is the one who comes to him and tries to comfort him right after his parents have unfortunately been murdered. But it basically builds up his character of this man is he's just a caring person. And so it makes sense later on, this is the person that Batman chooses to align with and why he's the one of the few cops who isn't corrupt. Because he's just a good person. And so you root for him and you really like him, especially as the series goes along.
Mm-hmm. I have nothing more to add.
Okay, then I'll move on with the plot. Sorry, I'm just trying to be better about leaving space. So Batman evades the police to get Rachel to safety, administering the antidote and giving her 2 vials, one for Gordon and the other for mass production. At Bruce's birthday party, Ducard reappears and reveals that he has been the true Ra's al Ghul this whole time. The dead Ra's was just a decoy, having stolen a powerful microwave emitter from Wayne Enterprises, which comes up earlier in the movie, actually, but the reveal of the plot comes here. He plans to use this device to vaporize Gotham's water supply, which Crane has filled with the fear drug, causing it to be distributed airborne and mass hysteria that will destroy the city. He sets Wayne Manor afire and leaves Bruce to die, but Alfred rescues him, repeating to Bruce what his father once said to him when he fell down the well. Why do we fall so we can learn to pick ourselves back up? Ra's loads the emitter onto Gotham's monorail train to release the drug at the city's central water source. Batman rescues Rachel from a drugged mob and indirectly reveals his identity to her, repeating what she had told him upon his return to Gotham. It's not who you are underneath, it's what you do that defines you. Batman confronts Ra's on the train and disables its controls as Gordon uses the tumbler's cannons to destroy a section of the track. Refusing to save Ra's again, Batman escapes and leaves him to die as it crashes. So, first and foremost, because this was the big, like, part of the movie is like the mystery box of exactly what the detective work is being found, of something's up but we don't know why. What is Crane doing, and even after we know he's working for Ra's, what's the plan? And I actually really like Ra's plot for destroying Gotham because it has a nice balance of being a little bit fantastical but also still being conceivable in that realism sense of it's obviously over the top, but at the same time airborne drugs causing mass hysteria seems like it could be plausible if not practical. So I really like that, and I think it leads to a really fun finale with some cool visuals of like a Batman flying over the fear-gassed Gotham.
Oh, that was such a great looking, like, it was every part of that was like, it looked so beautiful.
Yeah,
despite everything.
First of all, I want to voice my agreement with what Jake said. I think it does balance the, like, realism yet very out there and wacky in some sense thing very well, and I thought that while watching it. So I agree with that. Also, I thought that all the visuals looked sick when I was a kid watching it, and I think they aged well, and I think they look sick now. So thumbs up to that.
My only, and I'm going to say it, it's a nitpick, is just how easily Scarecrow is defeated. He just gets tasered to the face, which is very funny, but it's a little anticlimactic, especially knowing that he is Scarecrow. But in, like, the grand scheme of the movie, he is really just a pawn, so it doesn't really matter. Like, what really matters is Ra's plan to destroy Gotham and Batman trying to stop it. What Crane does ultimately is just progressing Ra's al Ghul's plan. It doesn't really matter what he does because he's just a minion, honestly. He's just like a sub boss to, like, the main boss. But I just wish they did a little more with him. But it was really funny hearing him screaming in pain while running away in a horse. That was funny, at least to me. I don't know why I found it so humorous.
That was kind of funny.
He just goes, while it's just fading into the fog. That's all you hear from him. He's gone for the rest of the movie after that.
It does look cool though, right before he gets tased. I really like the, like, simple Scarecrow mask with the, like, stark contrast of a suit, and then when people are seeing him all fear gassed up and he's on the horse, it looks sick. And then he just goes out like a little bitch.
That's another thing I like about this movie, is that they do a good job of balancing the realism with comic booky stuff. Like, they don't go too far into realism with, like, certain aspects, like the plot. The plot is pretty over the top in the grand scheme of things of being realistic, but it makes sense for a comic book. And then, like, Scarecrow, he's really just a professor. He looks like a professor most of the time, but he brings out, like, a freaking Scarecrow mask that looks like a Halloween costume. Like, it does a good job of balancing the comic bookiness as well as the realism, which unfortunately, like we talked about Marvel's humor, filmmakers didn't understand why people liked Batman so much. It's because it did a good job balancing comic booky and realism, not, saturating the comic bookism to the point where it's totally realistic.
So
that's why I like. Oh, sorry, I was going to add one more thing. That's why I like.
Go.
That's why I like the Christian Bale voice, despite how many people make fun of it. It's because it's silly. But
okay.
Wait, actually, real quick before we talk about it, did anyone else notice on the very first scene where he uses it, the very first time, it is slightly different than all the other times he uses it in the movie?
Yeah.
I know.
It's
yeah,
like
it's like he's still trying to figure out what the Batman voice is.
Yeah, like it sounds like they used like maybe an early take where he wasn't quite like in it yet, because it just like it doesn't quite sound the same.
I feel like it adds a
Interesting.
little more, if
Yeah.
anything, because it makes you feel like, oh, he's just
Yeah,
getting
but
into
I
it.
noticed that,
Like,
and I was like, I rewind. I was like, am I crazy? And I had to rewind because I was like, am I hearing things or is it a little different?
Yeah, now I want to listen back because I didn't catch that. I definitely made note of, for me, I don't like the Bale Batman voice. This is the only one that's tolerable for me. Like, I think it gets so indecipherable in Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises to the point of it's like it's distracting and kind of a detriment to the movie. But in this, I can at least like make out what he's saying, so I'm fine with it. And he does let off a really good first "I'm Batman,"
Mm-hmm.
which is another nice little nod, to Batman on films of the past. But yeah, I can't say I agree with liking the voice. I've never liked it. I don't. I'm glad you do, and I'm interested to hear that. And I see what you're saying about it being, but it's too much for me.
Okay, I like it in concept in that I like him, trying to disguise his voice, and every Batman does their own take on it in some sense.
Unless you're George Clooney.
Well, so be it. But anywho,
He's Batman.
but like
Clooney's Batman. They're all Batman.
But that being said, like, I do think it's a bit much. Like, it's a bit over the top for me. Like, it's a bit too marble in the mouth, kind of, I just can't rock with it all the way, is what I'm saying. It's too much, and it gets and I don't, like, hate it. I think it's fine. I don't think it takes away from the movie that much. I do think it gets worse in the other movies, but it's fine. I don't hate it, but it's not my preference. It's a little too much.
It sounds a little too much like your urethra getting stuck in your throat. Is that what you're saying?
Is your urethra stuck in your
Oh
throat?
wait, no, wait. Oh wait, no, I'm using the wrong one. What's that thing like that little thing, dangly thing that's dangles down your throat? What's that thing called again?
Uvula.
Uvula.
Where your piss comes out of.
no. Oh
Shit,
God,
Matt's got
Matt.
dick in his
Damn it.
mouth.
Matt's
Or,
got
or pussy, but dick goes further in your throat. But
Not
it
the
also,
way I
you
do
know
it.
moving on. We'll see how much of that gets kept in. So
Hopefully
Keep
none of
it.
it. Hopefully none of it.
probably all of it.
No.
It stays.
You said worse on air. We all have, I'm sure of it. But it also, I'll say this in terms of to smoothly transition from voices into dialogue, which you use your voice to speak. This movie also, and the trilogy as a whole, but keeping to just Batman Begins for now, definitely loves using the trick of repetition in its dialogue with the "it's not who you are underneath," as we talked about, from big moments like that, which I also love because we've already discussed this in past movies, but I love a movie that has both the balls to say its themes out loud, but then also like the wisdom to know who should say it and when and how.
Mm-hmm.
But they also use it for little things like when we were talking about the humor, the coat moment, with Bruce and / Batman and the homeless man. And it's a trick that I feel like could potentially be grating, but I think it's used to great effect here. And it's one of my favorite things about this movie and this trilogy as a whole is the repetition in the script and how it reflects the character, one character saying something and it coming back later on in the film or series, reflecting their growth.
Mm-hmm.
Alternatively, one of my bigger beefs with the movie is how Nolan shoots action, and in that I mean how he doesn't, because
You mean how
I
he
think
makes a cut every like half second?
yeah, a lot of in particular the like hand-to-hand combat, and you have like the physical fighting action, it really speaks to a filmmaker that is unaware of what he's doing and afraid of the fact that he's unaware, and it just really feels like it's just really poor. You can't tell what's happening for a lot of the fights between like Bruce and Ra's, or Bruce and anyone in the league. And it's a little bit interesting to me because I actually think like the Batmobile chase scenes are filmed really well and are really compelling and thrilling. Like they got me on the edge of my seat, in particular that first chase, and also when Gordon's in the Batmobile towards the end of the movie. but like anything that is like actual like physical combat is just really, it's not
Dull.
even the same of like, well, Catwoman's was hyper edited. It just feels like there was not a lot, like it felt like almost like a chore, like Nolan was disinterested in it and didn't care enough to learn or was afraid to even try.
It felt like he was doing it because it was a Batman movie, so he had to have fight scenes, but he wasn't interested in fully going into it.
Yeah. Wasn't it because the Batsuit itself was super limiting movement wise? Wasn't it that way? I know he couldn't move his neck.
I mean,
I
it
know that
wouldn't
was a
surprise
thing.
me, but I know the Burton suit was and the Schumacher suits were way more physically limiting, and they
Yeah,
had way better
that's a fair
action.
point.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm sure it's not easy to move around in, but I know it was an
No.
improvement over those, but the action was significantly worse.
Well,
But
and
that's a good
if
point,
the
though,
suit
because
is
it's
too clunky for you to film action in, maybe change the suit.
well, no, that's the thing though. It's just
Yeah.
like it's so in stark contrast with the rest of the shots because when it comes to like other set pieces, like things exploding or things moving around, like the Batmobile when he's driving the Batmobile, the camera is it stays very centered. It doesn't move, and it often cuts back to see the wider shot to see the rest of the action. And then when you get to the hand-to-hand combat scenes, it's the total opposite. The camera can't stay still. It's always cutting. It's always super close to you, so you can get like a sort of idea of what's going on, but then you don't really know what's going on in reality. You just kind of like fill in the blanks in your head. It's just one of those tricks where they do them because it can trick your brain into thinking the actors can fight, while in reality they can't. Like Liam Neeson, I don't even at that time like he was not a young man, so I'm not sure if you could like do like a wide shot and just all of a sudden Neeson like pulls off Keanu Reeves level stunts. I don't think that's gonna work that way, and so you gotta do like a little editing magic to make it seem like he knows how to fight.
Other than that, the movie's pretty gorgeous, though. In
Oh
particular,
yeah,
like I actually really like the training scenes out on the ice with Raish and Bruce, and that like the darkness of their costumes with the light blue ice and sky and water is really, really the unobstructed scenery kind of makes I think a viewer there who may be unfamiliar with Batman's origin and Raish's role in that it gives you a sense of trust, I think, in Raish, which circling back obviously is important for the revelation, the emotions of the revelation that the League of Shadows is bad, but it's also just pretty. And that, and
hmm
the other shot that sticks out to me is Bruce in full costume. I think maybe for the first time, standing on top of a gargoyle. Um, that one really hard. But yeah, I mean, physical action aside, hand-to-hand combat aside, I do think it's a very well shot, very good looking film. Is my point.
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So then, sorry, Matt, go.
Hmm?
Oh, I thought you started to say something. I thought I cut you off.
No.
Oh, that's a change of pace.
Yeah, Jason's been cutting me off this time.
Oh
What
shit.
the
Yeah, all right,
fuck,
Jason,
man? I'm
Jason,
sorry.
Call him out.
Jason, you cut off Matt, I cut off Sean, and then it'll be
I didn't mean
the
to,
brothers.
And I'll
but
cut
I
off my
didn't
penis.
mean to. I'm sorry, Matt.
I'm used to it.
Ouch, Sean. So, okay, last thing to talk about here before we get into like the plot wrap up is Bruce letting Raish die. Because I really fucking hate the whole I don't have to save you thing. I think it's maybe the worst part of like the whole trilogy because it's just a really dumb out of character like technically like kind of like Reddit ass logic to me.
Oh,
it just
oh
feels
God,
and it just feels so it would be one thing. I get that the point is he learned from saving him the first time on what happened, but to me, like the big hero moment would be still saving him, even knowing that. And it feels very out of character for. We talked about being more okay with Keaton's Batman killing, and that's because the movie never makes a point that he doesn't. This movie makes a huge point that Bruce is not okay with that. And then hasn't let Raish die anyway when he very easily could have saved him. So
Yeah.
it feels out of character and stupid.
And it's like on one hand I'm like, well, he didn't kill him, but it's also like, well, that's such a like semantics argument and like a cop out of like a oh well he doesn't he can't kill him, but he doesn't have to save him. Ooh, like, oh, like, big brain there, buddy. You know what I mean?
It's one of the stupidest things. It's like well, actually, he didn't kill him, so like he fucking let him die. It doesn't fucking. He still.
Bruce has Gordon shoot out the train tracks, so he killed him.
It doesn't like it. It's just like it's so stupid. I really wish that they hadn't had him be like, I'm just gonna let you die. Not like at the very least, I find it stupid. I find it worse because they try to use a cop-out and not just go like, I'm so angry with you, I'm gonna kill you anyways, and then maybe show like how later on that affects Bruce to some degree, since you've already established that he doesn't like murder. But like it's such a cop-out. It's like this, it's like you said, it's a stupid like tool of logic to get around like, well, he didn't kill him, but he's dead.
Yeah.
Like they wanted him dead by the end, but they don't want to have Bruce kill him, but they want to have Bruce kill him.
And it's not like I could have lived with if he had like, there were two people he had to save and Raish was one of them, and he had to make a choice and he chose the other person. That I'd be like, okay, understandable. But this is like, he directly is in some sense culpable because he had the opportunity to save him and looked at him and was like, nope.
The movie wraps up with Bruce gains Rachel's respect and love, but she decides she cannot be with him, telling him that they can be together only when Gotham no longer needs a Batman. Batman becomes a publicly known hero, no longer just a rumor, and Bruce reveals that he has purchased a controlling stake in Wayne Enterprises, firing Earl and replacing him with Fox. Sergeant Gordon is promoted to lieutenant and creates the Bat Signal, inspired by Batman's leaving of a mobster on a floodlight earlier in the film, and warns Batman of potential escalation, telling him of a new, unidentified criminal who's been leaving behind Joker playing cards. Batman promises to look into it and disappears into the night. So, as far as the Bruce Rachel wrap up, I think it's no secret at this point because we talked about it in both of the Raimi Spider-Man episodes so far, but I do not generally like the we can't be together because I'm a superhero thing, though it's just played out. Though I do think it's a little better here because at least that comes forth from Rachel after Rachel knows Rachel makes the autonomous decision to not be with Bruce versus just like the weird hiding a secret thing. I still love it, but I think it's a lot more reasonable and also just not, it doesn't feel like a childish decision on one of the characters' parts.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one thing that I appreciated out of this. It like, while it is overdone and I don't particularly like the idea of like even the point of them having a relationship, I would have really loved it if they just were friends, but like anyways, like it's just the idea of like at the very least because it was her autonomous decision, it makes it so much better than it could have been if it were just like we can't be together and it was Bruce's decision. I like it more just by putting it in her hands rather than in Bruce's hands.
I know, I absolutely hate that cliche. It's so dumb. It's so dumb and so overplayed. And then the what's great about this is that at least she comes to an understanding, right? There's a mutual understanding as to why they cannot be together, right? And so it doesn't feel horrible, right? Because it's not like, oh, I can't be together with you for this unknown reason that I can't specify. Bye. It's not like that.
It also does the really shallow Bruce Wayne's The Masquerade that I'm also not a fan of. But again, it's such a minor thing in the grand scheme of what this movie accomplishes that I can kind of let it slide even if I kind of wince at the line for like a half a second. But I mean, I think it's overall a pretty good wrap up. I think it ends the story on this hopeful, but there's a lot of work to be done. And Bruce is realizing that note. And then I also just think it has one of the best sequel setups with the Joker playing cards and the threat of escalation because it's ominous, and Joker is just so iconic that even when he like I can imagine in 2005 people being excited for that, and we'll get to that later. But I definitely enjoy the setup and the fact that it didn't come at the cost of a proper ending for this movie in and of itself.
Yeah, I loved it because it was set up, but it didn't. The movie didn't end in setup. Like, the conclusion of the movie wasn't set up for the next movie. They concluded the movie and then we're like, oh, and this. Which is how it should be done. If you're gonna set up a movie in the end of one movie. But I thought, I agree, I love the little allusion to the Joker there. because it's something so subtle, but it's just enough for you to know, like, everyone knows the Joker. It's enough to paint that picture for you.
Yeah, I think it hits it home. I hits everything really important home. The main a big gist of this movie, I think, is just the impact that Bruce's and Batman's allies have on who he is, and this conclusion really lets you see the impact that Lucius, that Rachel, that Alfred, that Gordon have on him, as well as that Ra's had, and even to an extent Scarecrow, who we didn't really talk about a lot, but I think Cillian Murphy, real quick, is a fantastic Scarecrow. I don't know if y'all have anything to say on the matter, but I think he plays
Yeah.
the really, especially post him like losing it and getting sprayed with the gas. I think he does a great job. But yeah, I mean, I like the wrap up.
I just, the only thing I wished was that he was in it more.
Yeah, but that's the thing,
Agreed.
though.
Because, like,
'Cause he's fantastic
kinda-
while he is in it.
yeah, he was great while he was there.
Well, it just kind of goes back to what I was saying before, where it just kind of made it clear that he was not. He was becoming less relevant because it's starting to realize that, oh, he's not the one in charge. He's just a pawn for somebody else. And so it made sense that as the movie went along, as the true mastermind was revealed, he had less time on screen. But he was great. So, like what everyone else has said, I wish he was there.
I mean, overall for myself, obviously I recommend this movie. I think it's really, really good. There's a few nitpicky things here and there. Like, I don't know why they say the E in Falcone, where they pronounce it they pronounce it Falcone instead of Falcone. I've never heard it pronounced that way before. They also pronounce Raish as Raz, which I've heard both ways from fans, from writers, and from in particular fans from that speak Arabic. I've actually heard it, but I say Raish. The Falcone, like, why? Anyway, if I had to pick a least favorite thing, it's probably Bruce letting Raish die. Everything else, even like Zaz is lame, I guess. I don't know. But like everything else is kind of minor, even the action shooting, like the poor cinematography of the action scenes, because it's just not like the core focus of the movie. But I do feel like Bruce letting Ray die kind of fumbles the bag character wise and thematically a little bit. But it's still a really good movie. There's a lot of things to like. There's so much like little moments of just peak Batman in there, like when he stops to be kind to a kid on a mission, the swear to God, swear to me. Him calling all the bats to himself is like the coolest thing I think he does in this whole trilogy. But overall, I think my favorite thing is just the like looking back at this when you're watching through these movies historically, how they came out, you really realize what a game changer this was for Batman on film and for superhero comic movies as a whole. And you can discuss ad nauseum the negative impacts of that as well as the positive. But just in the moment, I appreciate the boldness the most of Nolan coming in with a distinct vision as a filmmaker who, I mean, he had already had success, but he's not to the degree of huge name as he is now. But coming in with a distinct vision that is so drastically different than what you saw from Schumacher, what you saw from Burton, and what you saw in the 60s with like the movie from Leslie Martinson and the show. And I really respect that and admire that vision, for better or worse. So I think that's the highlight for me is seeing just the willingness to take a chance there. And I just want to leave my opinions with a scorching hot take that the bat symbol used in this trilogy, the Batarang one and the one that's used on the suits later, but not in the first one, is the best cinematic bat symbol, and I will take no other opinions on the matter.
I
Fair
can respect
enough.
that opinion.
I respect it. That being said, my least favorite thing is,
Well, do you wreck it?
well, yes, I do recommend it. I love this movie. I love Batman. I love this movie. This movie makes me happy. I was happy watching it. All that. That being said, my least favorite thing is not just the fact that Bruce or Batman let Ra's die, but the fact that he was so okay with it. Like that he like was happy to do it, that he like said like, oh, I don't have to save you, like the fact that he made a point to not do it, that really sticks in my craw, if that's a phrase that we want to use.
No.
It's really
we're
not a
gonna use
phrase
that.
I wanted to use either, but it's a phrase I did use, so here we are.
Yeah.
My favorite part though was the fact that I think Scarecrow, I feel like, is not the most common Batman villain, and I feel like it's easy when you're starting off a series to go for like the big hitters, the Jokers, the Penguin, all that. And not that Scarecrow's super, super obscure, but I feel like he's not that well known. And I admire that they went for someone a little bit outside of the box for the beginning of a series.
All right, I guess it's my turn. Well, unsurprisingly, I recommend it. The only thing that I dislike about this movie, and that means that I like everything else, so I'm not going to mention about that, but is it's just the missed potential of Scarecrow, like Jason was saying before. Unfortunately, as great of a villain Scarecrow is, we haven't really seen him in a lot of mainstream Batman depictions. And even in like other mediums like video games, he just gets the short end of the stick. Like, and was it Arkham Knight? He was teased as the main villain, but it just ended up being like another Batman Joker story, so he got cucked there. And even then, he wasn't that interesting. So the fact that the best depiction of Scarecrow is in a movie in which he's not even the main villain is really sad. And I wish we got more of him. I wish he got to demonstrate more super villainy. I guess that's how I can say it. But that's really it. That's really it.
But what we did see was pretty fantastic of him.
Yeah, exactly. It's just we want more.
No, I agree with you. I'm just saying I can't say enough good about Murphy's performance. I'm on a last name basis with him.
All right. I guess I will. So I definitely recommend this film. It's honestly, it's a really. I appreciate that this was the start to seeing more realistic depictions of superheroes, and while that can be very drawn out and boring, especially nowadays that we've seen it, I do appreciate that this kind of, once again, we found a movie that kind of bolstered the industry and pushed it forward again into a better light. So like, it's really appreciated at the very least. And then like I'm gonna go with the part I didn't like the most would probably be the action and, to some degree, how little of Batman we see, which I understand completely, because like you don't really get to see like Batman until like halfway through the film, which is fine. And I've dealt with like movies where you get like the situation of like the 2014 Godzilla movie where you get like 7 minutes of Godzilla and you don't see him until like halfway through the movie. I just wish it had been like maybe built up a bit better.
Really? I thought it was built up well.
I didn't find it too like, it wasn't bad. That's why it wasn't really bad per se. It just wasn't like, I wasn't like, oh yeah. At least in my opinion anyways, but like otherwise I think the action was kind of clunky at times too, but like that's really it. And then like, of my favorite things that I'd have to say about this movie, I really appreciate its take and them genuinely going for something that was fairly experimental for the time, to kind of experiment with the idea of bringing superheroes into a more realistic world. And I really appreciated that they went, it was really inspired, and like just the ideas that they had and how they went about it, I think was great. And I think it definitely gave good vibes at the time that it came out, and it definitely has continued on since.
All right. Well, thank you as always to at Alo VFX for our artwork for the podcast. Thank you as always to our very own Jason for the music for the podcast.
I do make the music. You can follow me on Instagram at the Upsides PA, Twitter at _UpsidesPA, on SoundCloud, The Upsides. I'm working on some music. I made the intro-outro music. It's from a song that'll be out eventually called Pins and Needles. I'm working on some more things that'll be out eventually as well.
Well, please follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts at Culture Illiterate, and subscribe to Culture Illiterate Podcast on YouTube. You can follow us to keep up with us on Twitter and Instagram at illiterate_pod. Also, as of recording this, Threads just launched, so I'm going to set up, this will be old news by the time the episode actually comes out, but I'm going to set up at some point before it does a Threads account, since who knows how long Twitter is going to be functioning. these days.
Hell yeah.
Hopefully that'll be at @illiterate_pod, but I'm sure if you search that or Culture Illiterate, you'll find us. By next episode, I'll have the ad set up. And you can reach us at cultureilliteratepod@gmail.com for questions, comments, anything. Next episode, we stretch back to the Marvel half of things with 2005's Fantastic Four.
Oh.
Bye.